Marcus Kane stepped off the transport ship and looked around Nexus Prime Station. The massive space station floated in neutral space between human and alien territories. It was built for meetings like this one. Kane had been here many times before, but today felt different. Today, everything could change. Kane was 52 years old and had gray hair at his temples. He wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic service. In his briefcase, he carried proposals that could end the growing conflict between humans and the Zephyrian collective. The Zephyrians were tall aliens with crystal-like skin that sparkled under the station's lights. They were proud warriors who controlled 12 star systems. "Ambassador Kane," said Captain Tony Brooks, Kane's security chief. "The Zephyrians arrived 2 hours ago. Their war leader Thaxmore is already in the main conference room." Kane nodded. He had read everything about Thaxmore. The Zephyrian leader stood 8 feet tall and had dark blue crystals covering his body like armor. He commanded respect through fear and had never lost a battle. More importantly, he had never backed down from a fight. "Any word from their delegation about the meeting terms?" Kane asked as they walked through the station's corridors. "They accepted the neutral ground rules," Brooks replied. "No weapons, no recording devices, just direct talks." Kane smiled slightly. That was already progress. 3 months ago, Zephyrian ships had attacked a human mining colony on the border. 27 people died. The humans responded by blocking Zephyrian trade routes. Both sides had been building up their fleets ever since. War seemed certain unless someone could find another way. The conference room was large and circular with a round table in the center. Thaxmore sat on one side with 2 other Zephyrians. Their crystal skin caught the light and threw rainbow patterns on the walls. When Kane entered, Thaxmore's eyes glowed brighter, a sign of either interest or anger in Zephyrian culture. "War leader, Thaxmore," Kane said with a slight bow. "Thank you for agreeing to these talks." Thaxmore's voice was deep and rumbling. "Human Kane, your people called for this meeting after attacking our trade vessels. You will explain this aggression." Kane sat down slowly. This was how these talks always started. Each side blamed the other. "War leader, I'm here to find a solution that works for both our peoples. The mining colony attack was unprovoked, but we can move past that if we work together." "Move past?" Thaxmore's crystals flashed red. "Your mining ships entered Zephyrian space. Our response was justified." Kane had expected this. The border between human and Zephyrian space was poorly defined in that sector. Both sides had legitimate claims. "I propose we establish clear boundaries and create a joint patrol system. This would prevent future incidents." For 6 hours they talked. Kane presented maps, trade agreements, and defense pacts. He offered mining rights to the Zephyrians in exchange for safe passage through their territory. He suggested cultural exchange programs and joint research projects. Everything Kane proposed was reasonable and fair. But Thaxmore grew more aggressive with each proposal. In Zephyrian culture, compromise was seen as weakness. Thaxmore's advisors whispered to him in their clicking language. Kane could see the war leader's crystals getting darker and brighter by turns. "You humans are all the same," Thaxmore finally said. "You talk and talk, but you have no strength. You hide behind words because you fear real conflict." Kane kept his voice calm. "War leader, strength isn't just about fighting. Building something together takes more courage than tearing it apart." Thaxmore stood up suddenly. His 8-foot frame cast a shadow over the table. "You speak of courage? Your people run from every real challenge. You negotiate because you cannot fight." "That's not true," Kane said, but Thaxmore continued. "Kakas collective has decided. We will expand into human space. Your weak colonies will become ours. If you wish to stop us, do so with weapons, not words." Kane felt his heart sink. The talks were falling apart. "War leader, please reconsider. War will cost both our peoples dearly. There has to be another way." Thaxmore's crystals flashed bright white with anger. "There is no other way, human. Your kind thinks the galaxy should bend to your soft words and weak proposals. You believe. Everyone should be reasonable like you. But the galaxy belongs to the strong. The war leader reached into his ceremonial belt and pulled out a curved blade. Its edge gleamed like polished diamond. This is the only truth the galaxy understands. Kane raised his hands. War leader, we agreed to no weapons in this room. This is not a weapon, Thaxmore said. This is justice. Before Kane could react, Thaxmore struck. The blade pierced Kane's chest, going straight through his heart. Kane looked down in shock, then up at Thaxmore's glowing eyes. Tell your people, Thaxmore said as Kane fell, that the age of human weakness is over. Kane died on the floor of the conference room, his blood pooling around his diplomatic briefcase. His proposals for peace, scattered across the metal floor. Thax activated the room's communication system. The signal went out across the galaxy's networks, showing Kane's body to every world that received galactic broadcasts. This is what happens to those who mistake Zephyrian honor for negotiation, Thaxmore announced. Humanity's ambassador is dead. Their pathetic attempts at peace have failed. The collective will expand into human territory. Any who oppose us will meet the same fate. The message reached Earth 6 hours later. President Lisa Martinez was in a meeting when her aide burst in with the news. She watched the broadcast 3 times before speaking. Get me Admiral Stone, she said quietly, and call an emergency session of the Joint Chiefs. Within hours, leaders across human space received the same message. Captain Jake Miller was commanding the UES Retribution on patrol when the orders came through. All human ships were to return to Earth immediately under Exercise Homecoming. Other alien governments watched the broadcast with various reactions. Some were shocked by the brutality, others secretly approved. Many had grown tired of human diplomatic influence in galactic affairs. The Zephyrians had done what others only whispered about. But as the news spread, something strange happened. Human space went quiet. No angry broadcasts came from Earth. No threats or demands for justice. Just silence. The galaxy waited to see how humanity would respond to the murder of their ambassador. Most expected protests and economic sanctions. The usual human way of handling aggression. They had no idea what was really coming. Captain Jake Miller stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and stared at the sealed orders in his hands. The heavy envelope bore the highest security markings he had ever seen. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, but he could feel their curiosity. Captain, said Lieutenant Sam Taylor from the tactical station, we're receiving similar recall orders on the emergency channels. All human ships are being ordered back to Earth. Miller broke the seal and read the orders twice. Exercise Homecoming. Immediate return to Sol system, maximum speed, radio silence protocols in effect. No exceptions, no delays. He had never seen anything like it. Amy, he called to Chief Petty Officer Amy Walsh in the engineering section. How fast can you get us to Earth? Walsh's voice came through the intercom. If I push the engines hard, we can make it in 8 days, Captain. But that's going to strain the power systems. Do it, Miller said. And Amy, I want you to run a full diagnostic on all our weapons systems. Everything. Sir? Walsh sounded confused. Is there a problem with the weapons? Miller looked at the orders again. Hidden in the technical language was something that made his blood run cold. All ships were to report to specific coordinates near Earth. Not to Earth stations or orbital facilities, but to empty space coordinates. That meant only one thing. They were gathering a fleet. Just run the diagnostics, Miller said, and make sure our missile magazines are fully loaded. Across human space, the same scene played out on hundreds of ships. Captains opened sealed orders and set course for Earth. Trade vessels, exploration ships, even deep space research stations all received the same message. Come home now. On Earth, Dr. Kevin Ross worked 18-hour days in a laboratory buried 3 miles under the Rocky Mountains. The facility was so classified that most government officials didn't know it existed. Ross had been working on theoretical weapons for 15 years, designing systems that existed only on paper and in computer models. Now everything had changed. The president herself had visited the lab and given Ross unlimited resources. "Whatever you need," she had said. "Money, materials, personnel. Make those theories real." Ross looked at the prototype on his workbench. It was smaller than a briefcase but contained technology that could tear apart a battleship. The gravitational field generator created tiny black holes that lasted for microseconds. When properly focused, it could punch through any known armor like it was made of paper. "Dr. Ross," called his assistant, Dr. Rachel Moore. "The test results from the Stellar Lance project are back. The energy output is 3 times higher than we projected." Ross nodded without looking up from his work. The Stellar Lance was even more ambitious than his gravity weapons. It could focus the energy of a star and direct it like a laser beam. The calculations said it could boil away a planet's atmosphere in minutes. "How many units can we produce in 3 weeks?" Ross asked. Moore checked her tablet. "If we use all the manufacturing facilities, maybe 50 of each design. That's pushing everything to the limit." "Push harder," Ross said, "and get me a direct line to Admiral Stone. He needs to know what we're building." Admiral Gary Stone stood in the war room deep beneath the Pentagon. The walls were covered with star charts showing human territory and the positions of every known ship. Red markers showed Zephyrian forces. Blue markers showed human vessels. What worried Stone was how few blue markers there were compared to red ones. At least that's what the Zephyrians would think if they could see these charts. "General Hayes," Stone said to the woman beside him. "Status report on the fleet recall." General Nicole Hayes was the head of military intelligence. She had been planning for this moment longer than anyone else in the room. 87% of our ships have responded to the recall orders. The remaining vessels are too far out to reach Earth in time, but they're moving to secondary rally points. Stone nodded. "And the new ships?" "Construction is ahead of schedule. The shipyards have been working around the clock since we got word about Ambassador Kane. We'll have over 500 vessels ready for deployment." President Martinez entered the room. Everyone stood at attention, but she waved them back to their work. "Admiral, I just spoke with the families of Ambassador Kane's team. They want to know when we're going to respond to his murder." "Soon, Madam President," Stone said. "We need a few more days to get everything in position." The president looked at the star charts. "The Zephyrians are celebrating Kane's death. Their news broadcasts call him a weak human who died because he couldn't fight. They're treating Thaxmore like a hero." Stone's jaw tightened. "Let them celebrate. It won't last long." Outside Earth's solar system, Zephyrian fleets moved toward human territory. War leader Thaxmore commanded the largest battle group from his flagship, a massive vessel called the Crystal Hammer. The ship was 2 miles long and bristled with plasma weapons. Thax quote. Moore stood on his command bridge and watched the tactical displays. His forces outnumbered the humans 3-1. Intelligence reports said the human fleet was scattered across dozens of systems. It would take them weeks to gather enough ships to mount a defense. "Commander Kextar," Thaxmore called to his second in command. "What is the status of our advance forces?" Kextar's crystals flickered blue with satisfaction. "They have taken positions near 3 human colonies. The humans have not responded to our presence. They appear to be in shock over your decisive action against their ambassador." Thaxmore's crystals glowed brighter. "As expected, humans are weak when faced with real strength. They will try to negotiate even as we take their worlds." "War leader," said another officer, "we are receiving strange reports from our intelligence ships. Human vessels are disappearing from major shipping routes. It's as if they are all going to the same place." Thaxmore waved a dismissive hand. "They are running home to hide behind their defensive stations. Let them. It will make our conquest easier." But even as he spoke, something nagged at the war leader's mind. The humans had been in space for over 200 years. They controlled shipping routes throughout this part of the galaxy. Their diplomatic service had negotiated treaties with dozens of species. They had to have military capabilities beyond what they showed. Thax quote Moore pushed the thought away. He had seen Ambassador Kane die. The human had been helpless, unable to fight back. That was the true nature of humanity. All talk and no strength. 3 weeks passed. The galaxy watched and waited for humanity's response to Kane's murder. Alien news services speculated about economic sanctions or diplomatic protests. Some suggested the humans might ask other species to mediate the conflict. Instead, there was only silence from human space. Trade ships reported that human vessels had vanished from the major hyperspace routes. Communications with human colonies became sporadic. It was as if humanity was pulling back into itself. Other alien governments began to take notice. The Zilani Federation had long relied on human shipping for luxury goods. The Aquatic Council used human translators for diplomatic meetings. Suddenly, these services were unavailable. "Something is wrong," said Ambassador Veltar of the Zilani. "Humans don't just disappear. They're planning something." But most species dismissed such concerns. The Zephyrians had shown the galaxy what humans really were: weak negotiators who couldn't fight when challenged. The silence from Earth was just proof of their fear. President Martinez finally broke the silence 21 days after Kane's death. She appeared on galactic communication channels for exactly 30 seconds. Her message was simple and delivered in a calm, steady voice. Ambassador Kane was a good man who died pursuing peace. The Zephyrian Collective has made their position clear. Humanity will now make ours equally clear. This is your only warning. Evacuate all non-Zephyrian vessels from collective space within 72 hours. The broadcast ended abruptly. Across the galaxy, alien leaders watched the message in confusion. A warning? From the humans? After their ambassador had been murdered on live broadcasts? Thaxmore received the message on his flagship and actually laughed. His crystals flashed with amusement. The humans threaten us. With what? Their trade ships and exploration vessels? His officers joined in the laughter. The idea of peaceful humanity making military threats seemed ridiculous. But deep, in space near Earth, something massive was stirring. 500 ships, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, powered up their engines. New weapon systems came online. Admiral Stone gave the order that would change everything. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump. Target, Zephyrian space. It's time to show them what humanity is really capable of. The storm was about to break. The space around Carthul Station had been quiet for centuries. The massive Zephyrian fortress guarded the border between collective space and the neutral zone. Its crystal walls sparkled with defensive shields, and weapon platforms surrounded it like a deadly flower. Commander HFY watched his sensor displays from the station's command center. His crystals were a dull blue, the color of boredom. Nothing ever happened at Carthul. Trade ships passed through occasionally, but mostly the station just existed to show Zephyrian strength. "Commander," called his sensor operator. "I'm detecting hyperspace signatures approaching our position." HFY's crystals brightened slightly. "Probably a lost trade convoy. How many ships?" The operator's crystals flickered with confusion. "Sir, the readings are unusual. I'm showing massive energy signatures, but the ship designs don't match anything in our database." Before HFY could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. Hyperspace portals appeared in perfect formation around Carthul Station. What emerged made every Zephyrian on the station freeze in shock. 500 human ships dropped out of hyperspace simultaneously. But these weren't the boxy cargo vessels or simple exploration craft the galaxy knew. These ships were sleek and predatory, like metal sharks designed for killing. Their hulls were dark gray with glowing blue lines running along their sides. "Alert status maximum," HFY shouted. "All weapons online. Contact Fleet Command immediately." But even as he gave orders, HFY knew something was terribly wrong. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, like they were controlled by a single mind. They formed attack formations faster than any fleet he had ever seen. Captain Jake Miller stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, but his ship looked nothing like it had 3 weeks ago. The entire fleet had been retrofitted with new technology. Weapons that had existed only in laboratories were now mounted on every vessel. "Admiral Stone sends his regards," Miller said into his communication system. "This is for Ambassador Kane." The human fleet opened fire. The weapons that struck Carthel Station were unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever faced. Dr. Ross's gravitational weapons created tiny black holes that punched through the station's crystal armor like it was made of glass. The defensive shields, designed to stop plasma bolts and missile impacts, couldn't even detect the gravity distortions until they were already inside the station. Sections of Carthel simply vanished as the black holes consumed matter and energy. The massive weapon platforms that surrounded the station were torn apart by forces that twisted space itself. Crystal walls that had stood for 800 years cracked and shattered. Lieutenant Sam Taylor worked at her tactical station with cold efficiency. The weapon systems responded to her commands faster than anything she had trained on. "Target the command section," she called out. "Concentrated fire." Dr. Moore's quantum disruptors joined the assault. These weapons didn't just penetrate shields. They phased through them as if the shields didn't exist. The energy beams appeared inside the station's hull and tore through vital systems. Power cores exploded. Life support failed. Command centers went dark. The Zephyrian fleet sent to defend Carthel never had a chance to fight. Missiles launched from the human ships moved faster than Zephyrian sensors could track. When the defenders tried to lock onto the incoming weapons, the targeting systems couldn't get a fix. The missiles seemed to bend space around them, making accurate targeting impossible. "Incoming enemy missiles," reported a Zephyrian weapons officer on the battleship Crystal Fang. "Intercept them." "Intercept," ordered Captain Moore. Hex. The Zephyrians fired their defensive weapons, but the human missiles simply phased through the interceptor fire. They struck the Crystal Fang's hull and detonated with energy that came from compressed stars. The massive battleship broke apart like a toy. Chief Petty Officer Amy Walsh monitored the battle from the Retribution's engineering section. The new engines her team had installed allowed the human ships to move in ways that defied everything the galaxy knew about space combat. Zephyrian vessels tried to track the attacking humans, but the Earth ships danced around them like fighters, attacking cargo haulers. "Engine performance is optimal," Walsh reported. "We're operating at 300% of our previous maximum speed." Miller nodded. The technology they were using had been theoretical just months ago. Dr. Ross and Dr. Moore had turned science fiction into science fact. But more than that, the entire human fleet fought with a precision that scared even their own crews. There was no anger in the attack. No rage or hatred. Just cold, methodical destruction. The humans had studied Zephyrian tactics for decades. They knew every weakness, every flaw in Zephyrian ship design. Now they used that knowledge like a surgeon's knife. 14 minutes after, the battle began. Carthel Station was gone. The fortress that had guarded Zephyrian space for 8 centuries was now glowing debris scattered across space. The defending fleet was destroyed. Not a single human ship had taken damage. The news reached the collective homeworld within hours. War leader Thaxmore stood in the Crystal Palace's command center, staring at the tactical displays in disbelief. His crystals flickered between colors as his mind tried to process what had happened. "This is impossible," he said to his advisors. "Carthel was our strongest border fortress. How could the humans destroy it so quickly?" General Zarmoth's crystals were pale with fear. "War leader, our intelligence about human military capabilities was completely wrong. These ships, these weapons, we've never seen anything like them." Thaxmore's crystals flashed red with anger. "Humans are weak. I killed their ambassador with my own hands. He couldn't even defend himself." "With respect, war leader," said Admiral Vextal, "Ambassador Kane was a diplomat, not a soldier. Perhaps we misjudged what humans are capable of when they stop talking and start fighting." The war leader struck the admiral with a backhand that sent crystals flying. "You dare suggest I made an error? The humans got lucky. One victory means nothing." But even as Thaxmore raged, reports were coming in from across Zephyrian space. Human fleets had appeared near 12 different systems simultaneously. The attacks were coordinated with timing that seemed impossible. How could humans organize such a massive assault so quickly? On Earth, President Martinez watched the battle reports in the Pentagon's war room. Admiral Stone stood beside her, his face showing grim satisfaction. Carthul is completely destroyed, Stone reported. 0 human casualties. The fleet is moving to their next targets. Martinez nodded. And the other alien governments? General Hayes consulted her intelligence reports. They're in shock. Most species thought the Zephyrians were the strongest military power in this sector. Seeing them defeated so easily has shaken everyone. The president looked at the star charts, showing human fleet positions. Blue markers now appeared deep in what had been Zephyrian space just hours before. How long before we can end this war? If we maintain this pace, Stone said, the collective will collapse within 6 weeks. Their entire military doctrine is based on overwhelming force and intimidation. They don't know how to fight an enemy that's actually stronger than they are. Martinez thought about Ambassador Kane lying dead on Nexus Prime. The man had genuinely believed in peace through understanding. He had died trying to find a solution that would prevent exactly this kind of conflict. Make sure our fleet commanders understand, she said quietly. This isn't about conquest. It's about making sure no one ever again mistakes human patience for human weakness. Across the galaxy, alien governments held emergency meetings. The species that had quietly applauded Thaxmore's murder of Kane now looked at their own relationships with humanity in a new light. Trade agreements, diplomatic treaties, territorial boundaries, everything needed to be reconsidered. The Aquatic Council's prime minister floated in his tank and addressed his advisors. How many human trade routes pass through our territory? Approximately 60% of our interstellar commerce depends on human shipping, replied his aide. The prime minister's gills fluttered with anxiety. Cancel all pending legislation that might displease them. Immediately. Similar conversations happened on dozens of worlds. The galaxy was learning a fundamental truth about humanity that they should have understood long ago. The species that could negotiate with anyone could also fight anyone. Their diplomatic skills hadn't come from weakness. They had come from the confidence of knowing they could back up their words with action if necessary. Captain Miller received new orders as the Retribution moved toward its next target. The human fleet was splitting up to hit multiple systems simultaneously. The message was clear. This wasn't just retaliation for Kane's murder. This was a demonstration of what humanity could do when they stopped pretending to be less than they were. Set course for the Vex Prime system, Miller told his navigator. And Lieutenant Taylor, charge all weapons. We're going to show the Zephyrians what real strength looks like. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. Captain Lisa Stone guided her fleet toward Vex Prime, the industrial heart of the Zephyrian collective. The planet below looked peaceful from space, a blue-green world covered with manufacturing centers that produced weapons and ships for the collective's military. Soon it would look very different. Stone was Admiral Gary Stone's daughter, but she had earned her command through skill, not family connections. Her ship, the UES Thunderbolt, carried the most experimental weapon in humanity's arsenal, the Stellar Lance. Captain, said her science officer, Dr. Patricia Davis. We're in position to test the Stellar Lance. The target planet's industrial centers are spread across 3 continents. Stone looked at the tactical display. Vex Prime had no major cities, just factory complexes and mining operations. The planet's 20 million inhabitants were all involved in military production. They had built the weapons that attacked human colonies. Now they would see what human weapons could do. Dr. Davis, explain to me one more time how this weapon works, Stone said. Davis consulted her tablet. The Stellar Lance taps into the Vex system's star and focuses its energy into a directed beam. We can control the intensity from a surgical strike to complete atmospheric destruction. For this mission, we're targeting the industrial zones only. Stone nodded. Unlike the Zephyrians, humans didn't wage war against civilians. Tactical, are the factories clear of workers? Our intelligence shows that Zephyrian industrial workers live in separate residential areas, replied the tactical officer. The factories are mostly automated during this shift cycle. Good. Begin the firing sequence. The Stellar Lance was Dr. Moore's masterpiece. Hidden in the hull of the Thunderbolt, the weapon reached out across space and touched the system's star, Magnetic fields stronger than anything nature produced grabbed hold of solar energy and compressed it into a beam, narrower than a human hair dot. The beam struck Vex Prime's largest industrial complex. The factory that had produced crystal armor for Zephyrian battleships simply vanished. Where massive manufacturing centers had stood moments before, there was now only molten rock. The beam swept across the planet like a paintbrush, erasing military production facilities one by one. From orbit, it looked like someone was drawing lines of fire across the planet's surface. Each line marked another weapons factory, another shipyard, another facility that would never again produce tools of war for the collective. Target destruction is complete, reported the tactical officer. All major military industrial sites have been eliminated. Stone watched the planet slowly rotate below them. Vex Prime would recover, but it would never again be a military threat. The collective had just lost the source of 60% of their weapons production. Meanwhile, in another part of Zephyrian space, Commander Alex Carter led a very different kind of mission. His ship, the UES Shadow, was invisible to every sensor the galaxy had ever developed. Human cloaking technology didn't just hide ships from radar, it bent light around them completely. Carter, S target was Mordak Station, the intelligence hub, where Zephyrian spies gathered information about their enemies. The station's databases contained military secrets from dozens of species. More importantly, it held detailed files about human weaknesses, information that had helped plan the attack on the mining colony where Ambassador Kane's peace mission had begun. Approaching the station now, reported his navigator, Lieutenant Mike Foster. No signs that they've detected us. The shadow materialized inside Mordak Station's defensive perimeter. One moment, the Zephyrian guards were looking at empty space. The next, a human warship appeared among them like a ghost becoming solid. "This is impossible," shouted the station commander as alarms blared throughout the facility. "How did they get past our sensors?" Carter's ship launched boarding pods before the Zephyrians could react. Human Marines in advanced armor cut through the station's crystal walls with plasma torches. The Zephyrian intelligence officers who had laughed at human weakness found themselves facing soldiers who moved like machines and fought like demons. "Secure the main database," Carter ordered his boarding teams. "Download everything, then destroy the station." The Marines completed their mission in 20 minutes. Mordak Station's computers were stripped of information before explosive charges, reduced the facility to scrap metal. The collective's intelligence network was blind. But the most terrifying development was happening in the laboratory ships that followed behind the human fleet. Dr. Patricia Davis had spent years studying Zephyrian biology. She understood how their crystal-based physiology worked better than most Zephyrians did themselves. "The nanoweapons are ready for deployment," Davis reported to Admiral Stone from her research vessel. "Targeting the collective's military personnel only." The weapons Davis had created were invisible and deadly. Microscopic machines that could identify Zephyrian crystal structure and attack it from within. When deployed in the atmosphere of a Zephyrian world, they would seek out military installations and cause the crystal armor of soldiers to shatter. It was warfare at the molecular level, and only humanity had the technology to create such weapons. On the economic front, Trade Coordinator Ryan Bell was implementing an embargo that would cripple the collective. Human ships controlled the hyperspace routes between Zephyrian space and the rest of the galaxy. Without access to these routes, Zephyrian trade would collapse within weeks. "All shipping lanes to collective space are now closed," Bell reported to President Martinez. "Their economy is completely cut off from external trade." Martinez looked at the reports coming in from across the war zone. How long before their supply situation becomes critical? With their industrial capacity destroyed and no access to external trade, they have maybe 2 weeks of military supplies left, Bell said. After that, their fleet will be grounded. The president nodded grimly. Economic warfare was just as effective as military action, and often more decisive. The Zephyrians could build new ships, but they couldn't operate them without fuel and spare parts from other systems. Back in Zephyrian space, War Leader Thaxmore was beginning to understand the magnitude of his error. His crystal skin had turned. almost black with stress and fear. Reports flooded in from across the collective's territory, each one worse than the last. "War leader," said General Zarmoth, his voice barely above a whisper. "We've lost contact with the Mordak intelligence station. Vex Prime's industrial capacity is completely destroyed. Human fleets are attacking 12 systems simultaneously." Thaxmore's crystals flashed desperately between colors. "How is this possible? Our intelligence said humans had no significant military capabilities." Admiral Vextal approached carefully. The war leader had killed 3 officers already today, in fits of rage. "Sir, it appears our intelligence was deliberately deceived. The humans have been hiding their true capabilities for decades, perhaps centuries." "That's impossible," Thaxmore roared. "They're traders and explorers. They negotiate instead of fighting." "With respect, war leader," Vextal said, "they negotiate when it serves their purposes, but they've clearly been preparing for war the entire time. Every trade agreement, every diplomatic mission, every peaceful contact was an opportunity to study us while hiding their own strength." The implications were staggering. For over a century, humans had been present throughout the galaxy. They had traded with everyone, negotiated treaties, mediated conflicts between other species. All that time, they had been gathering intelligence and building capabilities that no one suspected. "How long have they been planning this?" Thaxmore asked. "Based on the sophistication of their weapons and the coordination of their attacks," Vextal said carefully. "Probably since first contact, they've been preparing for the possibility of war since the day they met us." Thaxmore's legs gave out and he collapsed into his command chair. The humans hadn't been weak. They had been patient. Every diplomatic failure, every territorial dispute, every moment of alien arrogance had been carefully recorded and analyzed. Humanity had spent centuries learning their enemies' weaknesses while hiding their own strengths. And Thaxmore had triggered the trap by murdering their ambassador. Reports continued to arrive. The Zephyrian fleet was being systematically destroyed. Supply lines were cut. Industrial capacity was gone. Worse still, the nanoweapons were beginning to take effect. Zephyrian soldiers on military bases found their crystal armor cracking and breaking. The very thing that made them strong was becoming a vulnerability. "Sir," said a communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." The main screen activated, showing Captain Jake Miller on the bridge of the Retribution. Miller's expression was calm but implacable. "War Leader Thaxmore," Miller said, "I have a message from Admiral Stone. You killed Ambassador Kane because you thought humanity was weak. You were wrong. This war will end when you surrender unconditionally. You have 24 hours to consider our terms." The transmission ended. Thaxmore looked around his command center, at the defeated faces of his officers. 24 hours ago, the collective had been the dominant military power in this sector of the galaxy. Now they were broken and defenseless, facing an enemy they had never understood. "Contact our allies," Thaxmore said weakly. "Ask for assistance." The war that was supposed to last years ended in 6 weeks. The Zephyrian collective's formal surrender came when human ships surrounded their capital world and made their sun flicker like a dying candle. It was a demonstration that humanity could destroy stars if they chose to. War-leader Thaxmore stood in chains before a human tribunal on the rebuilt Nexus Prime Station. The facility where Ambassador Kane had been murdered was now under human administration. Captain John Morris, Kane's former security chief, read the charges against the fallen Zephyrian leader. "Thaxmore of the Zephyrian Collective," Morris said, his voice steady and formal. "You are charged with the murder of Ambassador Marcus Kane, a diplomat under the protection of neutral space treaties. You are also charged with crimes against humanity for ordering attacks on civilian populations." Thaxmore's crystal skin was dull gray, the color of defeat and despair. His 8-foot frame seemed smaller now, broken by the weight of his failures. "I acted according to the laws of my people," he said quietly. Morris consulted his tablet. "The laws of your people do not apply to neutral stations or to protected diplomatic personnel. You murdered an unarmed ambassador who came in good faith to negotiate peace. The tribunal lasted 3 days. Evidence was presented, witnesses testified, and legal arguments were made. It was a fair trial by any galactic standard, which made the outcome even more devastating for those watching. Humanity wasn't acting out of revenge. They were administering justice according to law. When the verdict came, Thaxmore was sentenced to death. The execution was carried out quickly and without ceremony. The war leader who had thought humans were weak learned otherwise in his final moments. President Martinez addressed the galaxy from the renovated Nexus Prime station. Behind her, construction crews were adding new docking bays and communication arrays. The station was becoming a hub of human activity rather than neutral ground. Ambassador Kane believed in peace through understanding, Martinez said to the assembled alien representatives. He died trying to find a solution that would prevent the very conflict we just concluded. War leader Thaxmore chose a different path. Let this serve as a lesson to any who would mistake human patience for human weakness. The aliens in the audience listened in respectful silence. The Aquatic Council's representative had attended every session of Thaxmore's trial. The Zilani Federation's ambassador took careful notes during Martinez's speech. Everyone wanted to understand the new reality. Humanity does not seek to dominate the galaxy, Martinez continued. We seek stable relationships based on mutual respect, but we will no longer tolerate aggression against our people or our interests. The choice, as always, is yours. The message was clear even though it was politely stated. Humanity was now the dominant military power in this region of space. Other species could choose cooperation or conflict, but they could no longer choose to ignore human strength. Admiral Gary Stone established permanent patrol routes through space that had been considered neutral just weeks before. Human fleets now appeared regularly in systems where they had once been rare visitors. The patrols were presented as peacekeeping forces, but everyone understood their real purpose. On the former Zephyrian world of Carvel, Admiral Jake Miller oversaw the integration of collective territories into human-protected space. The planet's new governor was a Zephyrian who had opposed the war from the beginning, but ultimate authority rested with Miller's fleet. Admiral, said the governor, her crystals flickering nervously. Many of my people are concerned about their future under human rule. Miller looked out the window at the city below. Carvel's crystal spires caught the sunlight and threw rainbow patterns across the sky. It was beautiful in its alien way. Governor, humanity doesn't want to rule your people. We want to make sure they never again threaten ours. What does that mean in practical terms? It means your military will be limited to system defense forces, Miller explained. It means your trade will be monitored to prevent weapons shipments. It means human representatives will have permanent bases in your territory. The governor's crystals dimmed. And if we refuse these conditions? Miller's expression didn't change, but his meaning was unmistakable. You won't refuse, Governor. The alternative has already been demonstrated. Across former collective space, similar conversations were taking place. Zephyrian leaders who had celebrated Thaxmore's murder of Kane now found themselves administering territories under human oversight. The survivors were treated fairly, but never allowed to forget the cost of their aggression. Dr. Kevin Ross and Dr. Rachel Moore received funding to expand their research facilities to dozens of worlds. The weapons that had ended the war so quickly were being improved and refined. More importantly, the research was no longer secret. Other species could see the construction of human military laboratories and wonder what new capabilities were being developed. The psychological effect was exactly what humanity intended. The galaxy now knew that human scientific capabilities were centuries ahead of everyone else's. The question wasn't what humans could build, it was what they chose not to build. Trade coordinator Ryan Bell found his job becoming much easier. Shipping routes reorganized themselves around human interests without any formal negotiations. Alien. Governments competed to offer favorable trade terms to human companies. Economic relationships that had taken decades to establish were rewritten in weeks. The Zilani Federation is offering us exclusive mining rights to 3 star systems, Bell reported to President Martinez. The Aquatic Council wants to double their purchases of human medical technology, even species we've barely had contact with, are sending trade delegations. Martinez reviewed the proposals on her tablet. What's their motivation? Fear, mostly, Bell admitted. Everyone wants to be on good terms with us now. They've seen what happens to those who aren't. The president nodded thoughtfully. Fear was a powerful motivator, but it wasn't a stable foundation for long-term relationships. Make sure our trade agreements are fair. We want partners, not vassals. But even as she spoke, Martinez knew the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The power structure that had existed for centuries was gone. Humanity was no longer asking for a seat at the table. They were remaking the table entirely. Other alien governments found themselves reconsidering everything they thought they knew about interstellar politics. The Council of Worlds, the galaxy's largest diplomatic organization, discovered that human representatives now held influential positions in dozens of committees and subgroups. How did they gain so much influence so quickly? Asked the Zilani representative during a closed session. The answer came from an unexpected source. The elderly Krillian ambassador who had been observing galactic politics for over 2 centuries. They didn't gain influence quickly, he said, with his species' characteristic wisdom. They've been building it slowly for generations. We just never noticed because we thought they were weak. The implications were staggering. Every human trade mission, every diplomatic contact, every cultural exchange had been part of a long-term strategy. Humanity had spent centuries learning about other species while carefully managing how much others learned about them. They've been playing a game while we didn't even know we were players, the Krillian continued. And now the game is over. The galaxy's new reality became clear in the months that followed. Human patrol fleets appeared in systems where conflicts threatened to break out. Human mediators facilitated trade disputes. Human corporations invested in infrastructure projects on dozens of worlds. It wasn't conquest in the traditional sense, but it was undeniably dominance. Humanity had become the galaxy's unofficial police force, economic powerhouse, and diplomatic authority all at once. Captain Lisa Stone, now promoted to admiral, toured the former Zephyrian territories 6 months after the war's end. The crystal cities were thriving again, but under very different circumstances. Human administrators worked alongside Zephyrian officials. Human technology was being integrated into local infrastructure. Human values of negotiation and compromise were being taught in Zephyrian schools. How do you feel about the changes? Stone asked a young Zephyrian student during a school visit. The student's crystals flickered thoughtfully. My parents say the old ways led to disaster. They say war leader Thaxmore brought destruction on our people through his pride. Perhaps there is wisdom in the human way of solving problems without violence. Stone smiled. It would take generations, but the galaxy was learning. Not through conquest or forced conversion, but through the simple demonstration that there were better ways to resolve conflicts than war. Ambassador Kane's memorial stood in the center of the rebuilt Nexus Prime Station. The simple plaque read, Marcus Kane, he believed in peace through understanding. Thousands of beings from dozens of species visited the memorial each year. Many came to pay respects to a good man who had died pursuing noble goals. But others came to remember the lesson of his death, that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their military might. It was their ability to remember. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment of alien arrogance had been carefully catalogued and prepared for. Ambassador Kane's murder hadn't